Okay, today's tutorial is about single crochet. I've already made a chain, so let's get started. Now you can start to work into your V's right here, okay? You can, and that's fine. You could do that. But let me show you something. If you turn your work to the side, you see those humps on the back? If you start working into those humps on the back, your end right here, your edge, is going to be neater. And if you need to put a border on this, your V's are still clearly defined, and it's going to help you find those stitches when you want to finish your project. Okay, so my preference is always to work in the back hump of my foundation chain unless the pattern tells me not to. All right, so we're going to go into the second chain from the hook. Now remember, this loop on our hook never counts, right? There's our first, here's our second. So let's go in to the second chain from the hook, grab our yarn, pull it through. Now we have 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, and pull through those 2. We're going to go into our second hump here, yarn over, grab it, 2 loops, yarn over, and we're going to pull through. And we've got our third, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to pull through. And we're going to do this all the way down the line. Okay, we're going to go into that back hump, pull through, 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through. And when you're working your foundation chain, it can get a little tricky because we're building, right? We're building a structure here. And when you're building a structure, it's easier to hold on to because it's a little substantial, right? We're building this. When we're working on our foundation chain, this is just kind of, it's just kind of flopping around there. And so it can be a little tricky. So this is where you want to slow down, take your time, get your count right, because it's really disheartening to chain up 100, right, chains to realize that you made a mistake and you got to take it all out. All right, we've got 3 left. Here we are. And our final chain. And we should have 10 stitches. Okay? 10 stitches. And we can tell they're 10 stitches because look at those V's. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This 10 can get a little tricky. This is where your stitch markers come in handy. Okay? Slip this in there. Until you get some practice under your belt and until you can really learn where your stitches are, these stitch markers will help you. Even today, if I'm working a complicated project, sometimes a stitch can get away from me. So the stitch markers will help you start to begin to recognize, and through experience, you'll be able to see your stitches a little more clearly. Okay? So let's turn our work. Now I'll give you another about turning our work. If we turn our work and we don't chain up, let me show you what happens. So we turn it clockwise, okay? And look at that. Our yarn is behind our hook, and we can see this first stitch clearly. Our yarn is behind our hook, and we can see that. Now let's turn it counterclockwise. Now look what happens. Our yarn is in front of our hook, and it's coming out it looks like it's coming out of this first stitch. And it looks like you know, you might mess up if you go in there. That's not really true, because if we pull that apart, there's our first stitch. So when you're watching tutorials and you're reading patterns, usually they'll tell you to go ahead and chain up before you turn. All right, and I'll show you. Chain up. If we turn, our yarn is out of the way and we can see that first stitch right here. Okay, now let's turn it counterclockwise. Again, our yarn is out of the way and we can see this first stitch right here clearly. Okay, so we're going to go in to this first stitch and we're going to 2 loops on our hook and we're going to pull this off. Now, it's a good idea to have a stitch marker at each end. So right here, pull it through. See that? That marks our first stitch. So we know when we come back that that's a workable stitch. It doesn't belong to the row below it. We need to work into that. That's our stitch number 1. All right, let's continue. We're going to go in and make sure you get both. See, I have both 1 and 2, both parts of that V. Make sure that you get both. Yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on the hook, and we take that off. And we'll go into our next stitch. Okay, into our next stitch, and pull through, and into our next, and pull through. Into our next stitch, yarn over, 2 loops on the hook, and we're going to pull that through. Into our next, and pull through. Now we know we have 2 stitches left, and we can clearly recognize that because we put our stitch marker here to help us. Okay. If your stitches are loose enough, you can go ahead and work in this with the marker in place. If not, you can just take it out. This is loose enough. See? Got that V? And we can take our stitch marker out. Okay, chain up 1 and turn our work. And we have our stitch clearly defined right here. So remember, we're going to go in, grab our yarn, 2 loops on our hook, and pull through. And that's our first stitch. And we'll put our stitch marker back. And here are our stitches. So I'm going to do this next row with you. In, 2 loops on the hook, here we are. And you'll get faster. You know, while you're starting, it's okay to take your time. Here we are. Now we have 2 left, but you see how that can get a little tricky right here? If we did not have the stitch marker right here, it very well could look like it belongs to the row below, and it looks like this is our last stitch. But nope, this is. So we can take our stitch marker out and make sure that we go in to this last stitch right here, And there we are. All right, I'm going to do one more row with you. We're going to chain 1, turn our work into our first stitch, 2 loops on our hook, pull it off. That's our first stitch. We'll put our stitch marker back. And here we go. Into and we can see that stitch. And like I said, you can take the stitch marker out before you work that stitch, or you can take it out after. It just depends on how loose that is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. It's a good idea to stop every now and then, recount your stitches, make sure that you are still correct in what you have. Okay? And that is our single crochet.